What if I told you that one of the greatest teams in NBA history never won a championship? The 2002 Sacramento Kings were supposed to be Destiny's darlings, a perfectly constructed basketball machine that played the most beautiful, flowing offense the league had ever seen. But standing in their way were the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers, a dynasty built on star power, Hollywood glamour, and championship pedigree. What followed was 7 games that would forever change how we view competition, controversy, and the very nature of fairness in professional sports. But to understand how we got to Game 6, that infamous night at Staples Center that still haunts basketball fans over 2 decades later, we have to go back to the beginning. Sacramento, California, a city that had never tasted championship glory in any major sport. But by 2002, something special was brewing in the capital city. The Kings had assembled what many consider the most complete team of the early 2000s, a roster that blended veteran leadership, emerging stars, and role players who understood their purpose to perfection. At the heart of it all was Chris Webber, the former Michigan Wolverine whose combination of size, skill, and court vision made him the perfect centerpiece for coach Rick Adelman's Princeton-inspired offense. Alongside him was Vlade Divac, the crafty Serbian center whose passing ability was legendary, even among his peers. But the Kings weren't just about their big men. Peja Stojakovic had developed into one of the league's most feared shooters, capable of raining threes from distances that seemed impossible. Jason Williams, white chocolate, brought an unpredictability and flair that made every possession electric. And Mike Bibby, acquired midseason, provided the steady hand at point guard that transformed a good team into a great one. The supporting cast was equally crucial. Doug Christie's defensive intensity, Hedo Turkoglu's versatility, Bobby Jackson's energy off the bench, every piece fit perfectly into Adelman's system. This wasn't just a collection of talented individuals. This was basketball poetry in motion. During the 2001-2002 regular season, the Kings won 61 games, tied for the best record in franchise history. They led the league in offensive rating and played with a joy and chemistry that was infectious. Sacramento had fallen in love with basketball and the feeling was mutual. But success in Sacramento meant nothing if they couldn't get past the roadblock that stood between them and their ultimate goal. The Los Angeles Lakers weren't just champions. They were a dynasty in full swing. Shaquille O'Neal, at the peak of his physical dominance, was perhaps the most unstoppable force the game had ever seen. At 7 feet 1 inch and 325 pounds, Shaq could bully his way to the basket against any defender, and his combination of power and surprising agility made him a nightmare matchup for every team in the league. Beside him was Kobe Bryant, just 23 years old, but already establishing himself as one of the game's most clutch performers. Kobe's competitive fire and championship experience made him the perfect complement to Shaq's dominance. The Lakers also had Phil Jackson, the Zen master himself, whose triangle offense and championship pedigree had already delivered 2 straight titles. Add in complementary pieces like Derek Fisher, Rick Fox, and Robert Horry, Big Shot Rob, whose playoff heroics were already legendary. And you had a team that knew exactly how to win when it mattered most. The Lakers had won 3 of the last 4 championships and showed no signs of slowing down. They carried themselves with the confidence of champions, the swagger of Hollywood royalty. But they had never faced anything quite like what Sacramento was about to bring. The playoffs began, and both teams looked unstoppable in their respective paths to an inevitable Western Conference Finals showdown. The Lakers dispatched Portland and San Antonio with relative ease, while the Kings overcame Utah and Dallas, setting up the matchup that basketball fans had been anticipating all season long. But this wasn't just about basketball. This was Sacramento's chance to prove they belonged on the sport's biggest stage, to show that small markets could compete with the league's glamour franchises. For the Lakers, it was about maintaining their championship stranglehold and proving that experience trumps enthusiasm every time. When the series began, it immediately became clear that we were witnessing something special. Game 1 at Sacramento saw the Lakers steal home court advantage with a 106-99 victory, as Shaq's dominance inside proved too much for the Kings' interior defense. But rather than deflate Sacramento's confidence, the loss only seemed to fuel their fire. The Kings answered back emphatically in Game 2, evening the series at 1-1 with a convincing performance that showcased their offensive brilliance. The crowd at Arco Arena reached decibel levels that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Sacramento had sent a message. This wasn't going to be easy. What made this series so compelling wasn't just the talent on both sides. It was the strategic battle being waged between two completely different basketball philosophies. The Kings played with pace, ball movement, and unselfish basketball that epitomized team play. Every possession seemed to flow naturally, with crisp passes and intelligent cuts creating scoring opportunities that appeared effortless. The Lakers, meanwhile, relied on individual brilliance and championship composure. When they needed a basket, they gave the ball to Shaq in the post or Kobe on the wing and let their superstars create magic. It was a more traditional approach, but one that had proven successful at the highest level. The series swung back and forth like a heavyweight boxing match. Sacramento's Game 3 victory at Staples Center was a masterpiece of execution, with the Kings shooting over 50% from the field and demonstrating that they could perform on the road against the defending champions. Game 4 belonged to the Lakers, as Shaq began to assert his physical dominance inside, overpowering Vlade Divac and forcing Sacramento to send double teams that opened up opportunities for his teammates. By the time we reached Game 5, back in Sacramento, the series had taken on an almost mythical quality.
Moments like that, you just never forget. It's not like you wake up dreaming in nightmares every night, but you don't forget, especially on a day like today. I'm pumped, and you wish you could go back in time and get that game again.
Every possession mattered, every call was scrutinized, and both fan bases understood they were witnessing something that transcended regular season success or failure. The Kings won Game 5 in dramatic fashion, taking a 3-2 series lead and putting themselves just one victory away from their first NBA Finals appearance. The city of Sacramento erupted. This was it. Destiny was finally calling. May 31st, 2002. Staples Center, Los Angeles. Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals. What happened that night remains one of the most controversial events in NBA history. The Kings came into the game needing just one victory to advance to the finals, while the Lakers faced elimination and the potential end of their dynasty. From the opening tip, something felt different. The referees, Dick Bavetta, Bob Delaney, and Ted Bernhardt, seemed to call the game with a different standard than what both teams had experienced throughout the series. Foul calls that had been consistent suddenly weren't. Contact that had been allowed was now whistled. The Lakers shot 27 free throws in the fourth quarter alone. 27. The Kings shot 9 for the entire game. Kobe Bryant scored 17 points in the fourth quarter, but he was aided by a series of questionable calls that sent him to the free throw line again and again. Meanwhile, Sacramento's stars, Weber, Stojakovic, Christie, found themselves on the bench with foul trouble. The final score was 106-102 Lakers, but the numbers that really mattered were those free throw attempts. Lakers 40, Kings 25. In a game decided by 4 points, the disparity was glaring. After the game, Kings coach Rick Adelman was diplomatically furious. "I'm not going to comment on the officiating," he said, before making it clear exactly what he thought about the officiating. The players were more direct. Weber's expression said everything. The look of a man who felt he had been robbed. Game 7 took place 2 days later in Sacramento, but the magic was gone. The Kings, emotionally drained from Game 6 and facing the psychological weight of having let their golden opportunity slip away, fell to the Lakers 112-106 in overtime. The Lakers would go on to complete their three-peat by defeating the New Jersey Nets in the finals. But for Sacramento, the loss represented more than just the end of a season.
That you must be feeling.
Yeah, we're upset. We fought tough, and
the disappointment that you must be feeling, Michael?
I'm upset, you know what I mean? Hopefully it'll be many years to come of this, and, you know, we still did a good job.
It was the end of an era. The Kings would never again reach those heights. Weber's knee injury the following season robbed him of his explosiveness. The core aged, key players were traded, and Sacramento returned to basketball mediocrity. But the controversy lived on. Years later, former NBA referee Tim Donaghy would make explosive allegations about Game 6, claiming that the league had influenced the outcome to extend the series and maximize revenue.
It was very clear. I'll never forget when Kobe was in a playoff series with the Phoenix Suns, and I forget who the defender was, but they called him the Kobe Stopper, or he referred to himself as the Kobe Stopper. And they would show us video of games previously of plays that fouls weren't called, of this guy holding him or defending him too strongly. And they wanted freedom of movement because they wanted higher scoring in these games. So they would show you plays and say, this was a foul that was missed, and these three referees missed this play. Make sure you don't let this happen tonight. Make sure you call this when this happens. And that's how they would program and train the officials in the next game to have more freedom of movement and have Kobe Bryant have the ability to score more points and do well.
While the NBA vehemently denied these claims, they added fuel to a fire that continues to burn more than 2 decades later. Today, the 2002 Kings are remembered as one of the great what-if teams in sports history. What if Game 6 had been called differently? What if Sacramento had closed out the series? What if the most beautiful basketball team of the early 2000s had gotten their championship moment? We'll never know the answers to those questions. But we know this. For one magical season, a small market team from California's capital city played basketball at a level that was pure art. They showed that teamwork and chemistry could compete with individual brilliance, that joy and passion were just as valuable as championship rings. The 2002 Kings vs. Lakers series remains the greatest and most controversial 7 games in NBA history. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful stories don't have happy endings, and that in sports, as in life, justice isn't always served. But for 82 regular season games and 16 playoff games, Sacramento played basketball the way it was meant to be played. And for those who witnessed it, that's a championship all its own. What if I told you that sometimes the greatest teams never win championships? The 2002 Sacramento Kings proved that legacy isn't always measured in rings. Sometimes it's measured in the beauty of the game itself and the memory of what could have been.